Hey everyone, this is Dylan,
And this is Gavin.
and welcome to episode 3 of the Millennial Button Mashers podcast. This podcast is where we're just going to armchair about video games that we love and feel deserve a little extra time in the sun. As always, this podcast is purely opinion-based. Yours may differ from ours, and that's totally fine. We just ask that you stay kind and civilized in the comments. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, something you want to clarify, or even something you disagree with, feel free to drop it below. Just be cool about it. Be kind to each other, and be kind to us as your hosts. Now let's do a quick callback to episode 2. In the previous episode, we talked about the video games and consoles of the early 90s and the early 2000s that really shaped Gavin and I's experience with gaming. That era really laid the groundwork for everything that came after. How we discovered games, how we played them, and why certain franchises still mean so much to us today. And we're going to be continuing that era styles episode into today's episode. But we're going to be shifting into what I'd call the middle school and high school era of our gaming lives, our early pubescent teenage years. This was really an interesting time for gaming for us, especially because this is when things started to feel a little bit more social with gaming, more connected, more online, and honestly, a little bit more serious. There was kind of a move from like cartoony video games to more story-based dramas. And before we go into any of the new consoles of this generation, we want to go back a little bit to some of the carryover of the consoles that shaped the previous era, but also kind of carried over into the middle school and high school eras for us. And so for those that aren't aware, PlayStation 2 and GameCube were still very, very prevalent in this time period. And I would be remiss to not talk about that before we go into those newer consoles. And actually, Gavin, I have a kind of a fun one for you, hopefully, and I might just be the nerd with this. But when I was going back and doing some research for the PS2 era that carried on into our middle school and high school era, I found Kingdom Hearts. And I can't believe I didn't talk about this in the previous episode because this was something that kind of merged the best of two worlds, in my opinion. It kind of merged the Disney world of my childhood years to like more of a, I would say, a kind of adult-like Final Fantasy experience. Quickly, Gavin, have you played Kingdom Hearts? I'm assuming you have.
I actually have not. I
Wow.
know of it. I know it exists. I know what it is. I appreciate it as a person who loves Disney, but I've never actually played the games.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I can remember being a kid and being absolutely obsessed with this world. So, for those not aware of Kingdom Hearts or those ones who haven't played it, like Gavin, this was basically, like I mentioned, a mixture of Disney properties as well as Final Fantasy. It was actually developed by Square Enix. And essentially, there was this kid named Sora, and he lived on this very small island with a couple of his buddies. And it was actually destroyed by some dark creatures called the Heartless. He was also chosen after that time period by what's called the Keyblade. Put simply, it's exactly how it sounds. It's a key-like blade that was capable of sealing the keyholes across the galaxy to keep things safe and stop the Heartless. Along the way, he runs into a lot of Disney characters in their worlds and fights the Heartless out of those worlds. And along that time period, you get paired with some trusty partners like Donald Duck and Goofy. And when you're Sora, you're going through the pursuit of having to save the worlds that you're interacting with, and also in the search of your friends Riku and Kairi. And that's where you get kind of invested into, like, I think there was like an Aladdin world. There is like a Little Mermaid world. It was really cool at the time because you kind of got to see those worlds from a different lens. I don't know. It was just really cool. But Gavin, I guess you haven't played it. What do you know about it? What are you hearing about it?
Yeah, like I said, I never played it. I don't know why. I think we'll get to it when we talk to the airs a little bit. I was a little weird about the games kind of like that I hadn't already played. But I do know quite a bit about it. I know a lot about the story, and I know there's been a bunch of games, and the stories are like kind of overlapping and a little convoluted at times, and it's weird, and like it messes with timelines and like all sorts of things. There's this really funny YouTube video made by Polygon, and it's super funny. I've watched that video, so I kind of feel like I have an understanding of it. But it's about like a 15-minute video, and he basically tries to do a breakdown and put on a linear timeline the events of Kingdom Hearts, and basically slowly unravels because it becomes an increasingly impossible task.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a little convoluted now that I look back at it a little bit. I would say Kingdom Hearts is probably the most linear, but then you go into Kingdom Hearts 2, and it has another character, but then there's also the original character, Sora, that comes back into the mix about halfway through. So yeah, it's very convoluted. And also the thing that's unique about Kingdom Hearts as well is there were console releases of the major ones, like 1, 2, and 3. But then there were like 1.5, 2.5, 2.5 remix, like just a bunch of stuff that was like on just Nintendo DS or a Game Boy Advance or whatever it was at the time. I'll be honest, I did not play those. So I can't speak to those, but a lot of people did like them. But I would have to say the reason why I gravitated to it was probably just being like a Disney kid growing up. And plus, I think at the time, Final Fantasy, and you could correct me if you think I'm wrong, but Final Fantasy wasn't that approachable for me. I just wasn't interested as a kid. And I think back then, too, a lot of it was turn-based, which we talked about in a previous episode. Not a huge fan of turn-based RPGs. So it was kind of a good mixture of like kind of live action fighting with a mixture of like the Final Fantasy goodness of those characters and kind of that art style. So that's kind of why I liked it. But
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, they kind of took Square Enix did a really good job of taking like the vastness and the storytelling ability of like your RPG type of game, and they threw the Disney property on it to make it a like make it sort of trying to think of the word for it. They're trying to make it consumable, like on a
accessible.
wide scale, because accessible. Yeah, that's another way to
Yep.
put it. Make it accessible for everybody, and like it draws you in to that kind of weird, convoluted story where because you already care about the characters.
Right.
Whereas as Final
You already
Fantasy
know
is,
them. Yeah.
yeah, Final Fantasy. I think the problem with us is it was a more when it first came out as more of a big thing in like Japan and stuff, and
Right.
like those kind of characters were more cared about then, and then so if you didn't know the characters, you didn't care about them as much. So like if you're running around with Goofy and Donald Duck and you get to run through Hercules world and you get to run through Nightmare Before Elm Street, Nightmare Before Christmas, definitely
Yes.
not Elm Street.
Different franchise.
Definitely
That's okay.
very, very different rated game. But yeah, run through Nightmare Before Christmas and listen to Danny Elfman classic music, and I think that made it more appealing and appetizing for kids to like or young people to get into that kind of game.
No, I agree. I definitely agree with that sentiment. It made characters that you knew growing up as kids more relatable in a elevated sense of like you're not just having like some random kid show, you're actually mixing it with like more adult like themes but not too adult like, if that makes sense. Like it's still a kids game, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
it's not like my little nieces and nephews would play it, right? That wouldn't be accessible for them. It would be something more like your preteen era that was like kind of in the middle, like you were kind of isolating or oscillating between two generations at the same time, or eras of your life, I guess. So completely agree. But I would say too, if you ever get the chance, go back to play Kingdom Hearts 1 and then that's it. Like I would leave it at that. I think it's a very good game just to kind of get like the idea of what it is and how it made its, mark on society from a gaming perspective. So just wanted to put that plug in there. The other thing though, I want to say too, in this like PlayStation 2 era, I don't know if you got this as well, Gavin, but Guitar Hero. I actually kind of forgot about Guitar Hero because it was something that you just don't really think about, in my opinion, like when you think about games. Like I think it was so mainstream and it was so fun and it was so like engaging that people just literally clung on to it. Kind of like the Wii, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here later.
Mhm.
But did you play Guitar Hero? I'm assuming yes.
Absolutely. I mean, Guitar Hero was a formative game in those years for me because I kind of got away from playing games that I like a little bit and I played games that everyone thought was cool and like,
Yeah.
kind of one of those weird things. And Guitar Hero, there's not a single person that played any kind of games around that time that did not love Guitar Hero. It took your rhythm based Dance Dance Revolution type game and it made it cool. Cause like watching someone do the Dance Dance Revolution pad is kind of goofy. They're just flailing their legs around. You made the little guitar and you strum the guitar and you get to play like all classic rock hits. And yeah, like I think you got to be a rock star, whatever, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, it's great. Loved Guitar Hero. Played that game way too much.
No,
probably.
I agree. Yeah, and those that aren't familiar, or they don't know what we're talking about, especially probably some Gen Zers that might be on this podcast or listening. To Gavin's point, basically you were a literal rock star for the game. Like it would introduce you to a guitar-like controller, 5 buttons on the top of the guitar, and then you'd basically strum to the beat as they came up. Kind of similar to Beat Saber almost, but you're not moving your arm. You're just hitting buttons correlated to the buttons that are appearing on the screen. Honestly, it kind of made you feel like a little bit of a badass rock star, which was really cool. And made gaming a little bit more fun and mainstream. And I think one thing I'd like to highlight too, back to what you said, Gavin, is back in the 90s and the 80s, arcades were huge, right? Like it was before like games actually came to the household. And I feel like that was kind of like a reinvigoration of like that arcade style mentality of game, but bringing it to the household so it would make it fun. Would you agree with that
Yeah.
sentiment? It's kind of like you
Yeah,
said,
that's
bringing Dance Dance Revolution, but you're not going to bring that big blocky stadium to your house, or stadium platform to your house. You're going to bring, a guitar that plugs into your console that's not bulky and easy to set up and easily accessible.
yeah, I mean, that is a really good way to explain the sentiment of what that game did, because it kinda did, yeah, it really did make the arcade game home accessible. I mean, it wasn't still it's still a lot less accessible because, I mean, you had to buy a whole separate controller, which was kinda annoying, although it was fun to try to play other games with that controller.
Yeah,
Try to
true.
play Resident Evil with, like, your Guitar Hero controller or something goofy
Hmm.
like that. Obviously, didn't really work well,
No,
but it was fun
it
to
was a
play.
challenge.
Yeah, and, one thing I did like about Guitar Hero is if you played bad, that crowd booed you, and then you'd
Yeah.
eventually
And
fail
you'd
the
fail.
song.
Hmm.
Yeah, you'd eventually fail, but before you failed and like, you had to restart the song or try again, they would boo you, and it was like, "Whoa, I'm not used to this." Usually, you just die in a
Yeah.
game and you just go
Yeah.
over, but, like, I'm actually getting bullied by a video game right now because I'm bad.
Yep. Well, plus to get out of that bad spell or actually get the crowd back in your favor, well, you would have to play better for a certain amount of time period, and then your gauge would go up from like red to yellow to green. And I think if it was in yellow, it was kind of funny because like no one would do anything. Like they weren't cheering, but
Yeah,
they
it was
weren't
like
booing.
you'd hear the occasional clap. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, yeah, they weren't on their feet, but they weren't booing you, so that was okay,
No.
you know?
Right, exactly. But then if it was green, they were like, yeah, they were behind you. But I remember explicitly, like, if you're playing like Through the Fire and Flames, which was insane difficult, you would have to like move up your, if for people that can't see, like you would have to move up your guitar like that in the middle. And so you're like trying to press the buttons at the same time of doing that. And that was the only way that you could save your special meter for that hard time period to make it through those crazy, stints of the song. So I just remember playing that and just being like aggressively lifting the guitar just to see if it would hit the special. Cause sometimes it wouldn't. Like sometimes you would like do it and it wouldn't hit it. And then you would fail
Yeah.
the song because of it.
Fun fact about that song, Through the Fire and Flames, the
Mhm.
band doesn't even play that song live that fast. They wrote the song to be a hard song in Guitar Hero, and when
Mhm.
they play it live, it is a slowed down version because it's not possible. Like, what? But yeah, that's like they've come out with harder songs now, but that's the first classic, like, this is the hardest song in Guitar Hero that I could think of.
But yeah, that will forever stick in my brain too. Like that's something that I don't necessarily need in my brain that will always be there.
Yeah.
And I'll say personally, I don't know if you feel it the same way, Gavin. I think when it first came out, I was probably like early pre-teenage years, so like maybe 11, 12. I can't remember exactly. But that was like my first foray into kind of like 80s and 90s rock. Like I just didn't have exposure to it before that, and I kind of made it cool and mainstream because like otherwise I would listen to music that like my older brother was listening to, or whatever I heard on the radio from my parents, to be honest. But I'm curious if you felt the same way, if you got that level of exposure to those types of music through Guitar Hero, because I did. And GTA Vice City is what we talked about before. I think between those
Yeah.
two, that was my exposure.
I you know what? It increased the number of bands I listened to that were like from that era, like those like 80s, 90s. But like I kind of always listen to that kind of stuff. Like that's just like, for example, like in high school for weightlifting for our sports and stuff, our coach had a radio mix or had like a CD on that would play that kind of 80s music. So like that's what I'm used to listening to for that kind of stuff. So always been a big fan of like the hair metal, rock and roll, all that kind of stuff. And then so like there's some new stuff that I listen to because of that. But yeah, it definitely like reaffirmed my love for that kind of music.
For sure. And I think the cool thing about Guitar Hero, and this is the last thing I'll say about it before we move on to kind of your consoles of that era, Gavin, like the PS2 and GameCube carryover games that shaped you during that time period. I think the cool thing about Guitar Hero is Guitar Hero 1, I think it was kind of just like prototyping. Will people actually like be receptive to this? But it really started a catalyst of Guitar Hero 2, Guitar Hero 3, Guitar Hero Aerosmith, Guitar Hero, like you name it, they made a Guitar Hero game for it. And then actually, that's probably where Rock Band also came into the scene too. And the cool thing about Rock Band, not to go on a tangent, but Guitar Hero was great from a guitar perspective, obviously, but Rock Band actually brought in singing, guitar. It also brought in bass. It brought in the drums, of course, which was very cool for me at the time too. But yeah, I think it was very influential in that time period, and it kicked off a lot of games. I don't know if they're still making Guitar Hero games. I'm assuming no, but they were for a long time period, at least like 10 years, I want to say.
Yeah, that I don't know if they're still making them to this day, but they definitely made them for a long time. Like I remember playing a lot of the Beatles one. I don't know if that was
Yeah,
a Rock Band or Guitar Hero, but that one was full. You had full band of instruments because I know
yeah,
Guitar Hero eventually threw in the whole
right.
band because of Rock Band. They wanted to keep competing.
Well, plus
Yeah,
just
that
not to cut you off, but do you remember how Guitar Hero, I think Guitar Hero did this, where Rock Band had just like the 4 drums and then they had the bass pedal
yeah, and then they had
for the
the
drums.
cymbals.
Well, the Guitar Hero had the cymbals, yeah, like to
Hmm.
elevate and like meet the crowd where they are, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but I just had to
No, it's all good.
mention that too.
But that's the funny thing is like with Guitar Hero, you're not really learning how to play guitar. Like
No,
with the guitar, but with the drums, you kind of are learning how to play the drums with
a
the
little
drum
bit.
kits.
It's definitely
Like,
more applicable.
yeah. And then I mean with the singing, you weren't learning how to sing because it wasn't even a tone thing. It was just loud. Like if you got a certain amount of loud, you would see
Mhm.
the instead of having the notes, you would just have to get your voice to follow the little sound wave. And if you went loud, you could hit the note without actually hitting the note. As a
Right.
tone deaf person, I loved it because I couldn't sing for crap, still can't.
Mm,
But
yeah. Plus the microphone, like the interludes or something, you'd have to like hit the microphone. I mean, it was
yeah, you
kind of
just
funny, but like really
yeah,
like
like a
singers still
tambourine.
really
Instead
fucking
of
do
hitting a
that.
tambourine, yeah, you just tapped it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. All right. But yeah, I would be remiss to not mention those two specifically with PS2 era games. But Gavin, I know you had a lot that you wanted to talk about with like GameCube and PS2 era for that before we talk about some of the newer consoles that came out. So I'll give you some space
Yeah,
there.
the couple games I could think of that were from the beginning of this era toward the or that carry over for the GameCube and the PlayStation 2. One of them was the Harry Potter Quidditch World Cup game. Don't know if you played that one. It was
I did.
terrible, but in a great
Yes.
way because I mean it's literally just a World Cup of Quidditch, and it was just. I mean, I'm sure if I went back and played it, it would be
Terrible.
like bad graphics and hard to play. But I just remember doing it and loving it and playing that, and it was just fun. Like I wish they would make a real like a game of it now, like
They
because I think they
did.
could make a good.
Actually, I didn't know
Wait,
if
did
you
they
know that.
really?
They did.
I did
Yeah, and
not know that,
it did not sell well, to say the least.
which is probably why I haven't heard of it.
Exactly. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I'll search for it while you're talking about some other stuff. But
Yeah,
did you play Hogwarts Legacy a couple years ago when it came out?
I did play that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was the biggest gripe for a lot of people playing Hogwarts Legacy was that there was no Quidditch component, so you couldn't like sign up for the team, you couldn't play in the
yeah.
games. But I mean, there was the flying component, of course, and I think it was well done in that regard. But there was no Quidditch. The reason why they didn't do that, at least this is my speculation, is because they were developing that other Quidditch World Cup revamp game. And so now they're actually I think you can get a bundle now of Hogwarts Legacy and that new Quidditch game. Again, I can't remember right off the top of my head what it's called, but it did come out relatively around the same time as Hogwarts Legacy. Like, I want to say like 8 months after or something like 8 months would be very specific. 6 months to a year after Hogwarts Legacy. And I think they're just
Six
trying to
months,
carry
7 months.
momentum, something like that. Yeah. 6, 7. Yeah.
That was probably one of the games for the GameCube. Another one, I mean, I still played your Game Boy Advance games. Still was hitting up the Pokemon. So you're like Pokemon Emerald, Ruby, Sapphire. Those were the last Game Boy Advance games with your Fire Red and Leaf Green as like a revamp of the blue and red, which originally was blue and green or red and green in Japan, which is why they did fire red, leaf green. So those were fun. Really, one of the first games that was like a non like it's still a gamer game, but more of like a this is a mainstream type game that like most people like is Need for Speed Underground 2
Yep.
specifically. Played
I
that one
remember.
on the GameCube.
Okay.
That one was cool. It was, like, kind of in the era of, like, your TV show, like, Pimp My Ride and stuff like that. You're driving around a cool pimped out car, and you're doing drifts, and, like, the soundtrack for that was good. It was a healthy
It
mix
was.
of, like, hip hop, old rap, old rock. It would even
hmm
get into some, like, indie alternative rock nowadays, like or for, like, that nowadays at the time, and it was just cool. That was one of the first cool games, and then the Tony Hawk games, obviously, we touched on those last time, but I think this is really when they kinda got into their own of, like, combining the underground feel of what skateboarding was like with just being able to do cartoonish stuff and, like, do cool stuff, and, I mean, I think Tony Hawk never had to work again. I mean, continues to skate to this day. There's a couple cool
And his son
documentaries
too.
about that. Yeah, and his son. But there's a cool documentary about how about that whole thing, and it even talks about the Tony Hawk thing. But yeah, it's like the game was almost accidentally like really insanely popular, and I think it's just because it scratched an itch that no one knew they needed. But once you had it, you're like, dude, this game is like unreal.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah,
especially the underground ones. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 through 4, it was definitely compelling, but I think when you were able to do Underground 1 and 2 and create your own character and kind of be able to I think you could choose actually a little bit on like what missions you wanted to do, and it was more like I wouldn't say open world, but more open level style versus with the Tony Hawk 1 through 4, you had levels and then you had missions within those levels that you had a certain time that you had to hit all the mission objectives. But with Underground, you had, I'm going to, skate up to Bam Margera, do his task for him. It might be to do I don't know, do a Madonna over a certain statue or something like that. Like it was just really fun. I've actually played it recently
yeah.
on my PSP, Underground 2. I wanna play Underground 1 again, and I think there might be, like, a mod out there in the PC community to actually revamp the graphics for it. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I think it's
I'm
called,
sure
like,
there
Thug
is.
Pro or something like that.
I'm sure there is.
So, yeah, just wanted to reiterate, those games were
Yeah.
fantastic, and I honestly forgot about that. Those were definitely in that time period too.
Yeah, they kinda started doing that with the Tony Hawk's 4, like, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater
Yeah.
4 was the first one where you're in San Francisco and you see people standing around and you drive up to them or you skate up to them and they give you a mission, but that one you're still as a custom if you do a custom skater, there's no difference than you being Tony Hawk, and to your point, the Tony Hawk's Underground games did that, but then they also you are a custom character, like, you're not gonna be any of the pro skaters. You can skate with them eventually, but it's building a story around you becoming a pro skater, and that was fun, and I did like that. I liked those for a different reason because that one is more story and, like, it's super goofy with the second one,
Mhm.
like, with the jackass guys, like, you end up, like sometimes your mission is score 500,000 points, sometimes it's go throw tomatoes at pedestrians
Right.
or knock over a cop because he's standing by a ledge, and if you grind on it and knock him into the water, it's funny.
Mhm.
And so yeah, like that it definitely made that one more like they took the skating culture and turned it into a story as opposed to you just skateboarding for a game. So they definitely did do a better job for that.
I agree. I completely agree. Any other games in that era that you wanna talk about or with, like, GameCube or PlayStation before we move into, like, some Wii and Xbox 360?
I feel like that's pretty much it for the GameCube and PlayStation 2. 'Cause they stayed around so long, even when we get into the like your Xbox 360, your PlayStation
Yeah.
3, and your Wii. Like, they were still making GameCube games. Like, they kind of just started making the same game for both systems, for the Wii and the GameCube in that case. But they kind of ran with them both. So you didn't really have to upgrade right away because they were still making it. Like I could still remember some games I still had a GameCube and a Wii at the same time. And like obviously there's certain games you couldn't play on the GameCube, but there's some I still played and I still went back to those ones I had games I had talked about like in the previous episode like your Paper Mario, your Wind Waker, Sunshine. I still went back to those quite a bit.
Yeah. And I'd have to say, like, we'll go into like some history of those consoles as well, but just to lay the framework for those that aren't familiar, like the Wii and the PlayStation 3, they were, to Gavin's point, kind of still held in parity or feature parity with PS2 and PS3, and then same thing with GameCube and Wii. But the reason for that, now that I'm recollecting on this, is Wii's were so hard to come by when they first came out because they sold like hotcakes in the US. Like people just absolutely loved them, and gamers or non-gamers alike. So it was very hard to get your hands on one. Same thing with PS3, but from a different approach. I don't know if you remember this, Gavin, but I want to say it was like one of the most expensive consoles like ever when it launched, at least for the time period, given inflation, given other cost of living, increments and things to keep in mind. But PlayStation 3s were so expensive when they came out. I remember like when I wanted to get one, it was more compelling for my parents that they could get a Blu-ray player with the PlayStation 3. And that's why they were kind of a little bit more for it. And we'll talk about that here in a
Yeah,
second. But I think that's why it
yeah,
was the availability, and they had to, at least from a developer perspective, keep with the times and keep their player base happy by keeping PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 players happy. And same thing
yeah.
with
It
the
is
other
funny.
Nintendos. Yep.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. They both were scarce for different reasons. Like the Wii was scarce because everyone wanted a Wii because Nintendo did a deliberate job of wanting to have a more generic household console that everyone can play. From little 5-year-old Timmy to Janice who works 50 hours a week, they can come sit on the couch and play the Wii without having, it's more of a casual, they wanted it to be a casual console. And
Hmm.
don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of hardcore games on it, but the idea of it was to be a casual, fun console. And then the PlayStation 3 was scarce because it at the time was, I think, the most expensive non like PC console you could
It
get, like
was.
aside from building a PC. And it's funny you bring that up as that was the argument for a lot of my friends and stuff like that that you had with your parents. It's like, well, it's a Blu-ray player because Blu-ray players were pretty expensive at the time because that was going to be the new format of DVDs and all this other stuff. And it never really fully killed DVDs, but they're still around. But yeah, it is funny that that was the selling point. It's like, well, you're going to pay a lot for it, but you get a Blu-ray player and a PlayStation, not just a Blu-ray player.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Because that was the big tipping point for my parents was, well, actually, this is a funny story. So PlayStation 3 had came out. Blu-rays were starting to come out into the scene. To Gavin's point, and those that aren't familiar, it was a time period between DVDs and Blu-rays. Blu-rays were supposed to bring more resolution, more, better graphics, let's say, better performance. It was supposed to be like let's say, it was supposed to be very complimentary of the cinema. Like it was supposed to elevate that experience for you in your home experience. In my opinion, I don't feel like it was that vastly different, but there was definitely a different, experience there. But basically, I remember going to a store locally, and my parents were looking for a Blu-ray player, and they ended up buying one. And I didn't even bring up the fact that PlayStation 3 had a Blu-ray player in them because I was like, they're not going to buy it. It's way too expensive. There's no way. I've got my PlayStation 2. They're not going to go for it. And then they buy it. It's so expensive, the Blu-ray player, not the PlayStation 3. Get home, and I talk to them about it after the fact. And they're like, oh, yeah, we would have bought a PlayStation 3 if you would have just told us it had a Blu-ray player. And I was like, you are joking. I was so mad. And they could have been pulling my chain. Who knows? But I was so upset. And I was like, why didn't I just say something? Like I was so upset. But anyways,
That is that no, that's hilarious. That is
it's
very funny.
awful. I was so mad. But before we go into any other of those consoles in the air, I'd be remiss not to mention just all the video games that came out between 2004 and 2012, because there were some pretty significant consoles that came out in that era and kind of household names here too. So I'll just do a quick recap before we go into anything further with PlayStation 3 first here. But back in 2004, this was when the original Nintendo DS actually came out. It came out late 2004, early 2005. And that really changed the video game handheld scene for a lot of folks. It kind of took that Game Boy Advance-like experience and up-leveled it a touch by providing that touchscreen-like component in video game handhelds. Then in 2005, that's when Xbox 360 first came out. And that's also when PSP or PlayStation Portable first came out as well. So that was Sony's first foray into handheld gaming, which was kind of unique for them. That wasn't something that they were known for at that time yet. And then in 2006, that's when the PlayStation 3 and Nintendo Wii came out. We've already been talking about them a little bit, but I just wanted to give kind of like a timeline representation of those before we talked a little bit more about those. But I guess, Gavin, I want to talk about PlayStation 3 first. Did you have a PlayStation 3? What was your level of exposure, if any?
I was Team Xbox back in those days. So I was late to, because it felt like in that era you were either Xbox or you were PlayStation. Like it
Definitely
was
a hard
kind of
line in
like
the sand for sure.
there's even a South Park episode about it, kind of, where it shows that like it's a war between the two sides, because it was funny because it's like all your friends, you kind of decide like, oh, are we going to be Xbox people or are we going to be PlayStation people? Because you don't want to be the one that has the PlayStation when everyone has Xbox, because you used to
Right.
not be able to play together
Yep.
on certain online games. So I was on the Xbox camp, and so a lot of these games we're going to talk about I didn't play at the time, and I was late to the party on a lot of them, but I do appreciate them now and have since played them.
I gotcha. Cool. Well, we'll talk about Xbox 360 here in a bit, but I'll do a quick couple of things with PlayStation 3. I've already mentioned my horror story with my parents on buying a PlayStation 3, but a couple noteworthy video games that came out in that PS3 era for me, Uncharted 2 specifically, and I'll talk to you about why. And then also, this was my kind of first exposure into Call of Duty. Before that, I had really no exposure to it, but I had played Black Ops and Modern Warfare 2 on both the PS3 for both of those games. And I think, Gavin, to your point, like before getting into like social gaming, let's say, Call of Duty just wasn't on my docket to play. It's not that I didn't like what they had to, play. Like I just wasn't a first person shooter guy. And so I never really got exposed to it until later in life when my friends were playing it. But quickly talking about Uncharted. Uncharted was my very first game that I ever played on PS3, Uncharted 2 specifically. And I remember when PlayStation 3 came out, that was one of those launch titles. And I don't know if it was a launch title now that I look back on it, but it was one of those like iconic exclusives that I needed to have. And it was one of those things, like you saw like a cinematic trailer where basically Nathan Drake's falling out of the back of a cargo carrier, an airplane, and he's basically holding on for dear life, trying to basically climb up the cargo that's on nets and trying to get back up to the person that's basically trying to kill him. And it kind of harkens back to what we talked about in the first episode with you, Gavin, is like Indiana Jones and also Lara Croft with Tomb Raider. It was that type of game, but it was kind of more elevated into like a drama-like style. And so for those that aren't aware or maybe don't have access to PlayStation, it was basically a cinematic action adventure series of a treasure hunter named Nathan Drake. And he was believed to be the great-great-great-grandson of Sir Francis Drake, which was a legendary explorer back in, I want to say, the 1600s. And basically there was 4 games in the time, and it was all about Nathan going back and trying to find the treasure that Sir Francis Drake had left behind, because there was a exorbitant amount of treasure or money left behind. And that was basically how Nathan tried to make money. And it was all about him trying to find it while also getting hunted by people that were also trying to find that same treasure. And so it was kind of like a third-person action cinematic adventure series, similar to the Tomb Raider series. So it's kind of like a revamp of that during that time period. And I just think back to that Uncharted 2 experience. Like that was my first of the Uncharted series. I actually went backwards. I think I played 2, then 1, then 3, then 4. And honestly, it's one of the most iconic games in that PlayStation 3 genre or era for me. And I think the funny thing, going back to like episode 2 that we talked about, Naughty Dog was a big, publisher for us too, with Jak and Daxter. Who made Uncharted? Naughty Dog made Uncharted. So like it was kind of funny that like I kind of followed them from my childhood era with Jak and Daxter to that more elevated experience of Uncharted. And so I just think that's funny that every era of my life has had some level of Naughty Dog exposure that's been pretty cool. So I guess, Gavin, did you ever play Uncharted, or what was your experience with it?
Uncharted? I
Yeah.
have not played it, but I've watched a playthrough it. I think I've watched a streamer play it or something. But Yeah, it did kind of give like you said, the Indiana Jones and the Tomb Raider type vibes, but it was more
Hmm.
of a like they made it more cinematic. Like they wanted
Yes.
it. It's almost like they said, take Tomb Raider and make it a cinematic like movie, make it look like a
Right.
movie. Is kind of what they did. Like because it's less of not. It's obviously still a game,
Yeah.
but they wanted it to
More
look
dramatic.
like a movie, and that's kind of what the PlayStation 3 did as a console. Like we want our games to look like movies, and then the Wii, which we'll talk about later, was like, we want to have we want as many people to play it, but and then Xbox was like, we kind of want to fit that middle pie chart, and yeah, so yeah, the Uncharted was one of the ones, and then I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but The Last of Us was another one that was like a movie, but it's a game.
Yeah. And not to sidebar too much, and you guys are probably going to kill me if you are listening. I've not played The Last of Us. I'll just say it out loud. I am a big PlayStation supporter, and it's funny. I'm a big Naughty Dog guy too. Not played The Last of Us, and I don't know why that is. Like I always get a little bit of flack for not playing it for like when I tell people. And I know it's a good game. Don't get me wrong. I know 1 and 2 are both good games. I think the thing that holds me back is that there's just so many other good games. And I've never really been a huge zombie slash apocalypse person. And so that's why it's never really, caught my eye necessarily. I know they're good games and I know even the HBO series is good, but I just haven't dove into it.
That makes total sense because I mean, if you don't like the zombie aesthetic, you're not gonna like the game. That's literally the whole game. It's just like it's a zombie post-apocalyptic game. But yeah,
Right, right. And again, I know it's a good game, but I digress. Other thing with PlayStation 3, really quick, going back to Call of Duty, I think Black Ops was my first Call of Duty game that I ever played. And it's funny because, like, I think when I would go back to like some childhood days, my brother in law, Joe, had an Xbox, original Xbox, and he had played the Medal of Honor series. And to me, the Medal of Honor series was always very hardcore, very, I wouldn't say in your face, but aggressive in terms of like the story it was trying to tell. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It was just like for me at the time a little bit jarring. It wasn't my type of video game at the time. And so that's why I took a little bit longer to get to Call of Duty because I was like it's not going to be for me. I'm not really an army guy. I'm not really a war guy. I'm not a first person shooter guy, but again, friends influenced me to give it a try, and I did. And honestly, I'm glad that I did. I like Call of Duty for what it does and what it did at the time because I think it was very influential in kind of like social circles, especially. But I think when it comes to multiplayer, actually, that was kind of my first game that I really dug into with multiplayer. That's where Prestige became a thing with like if you got to level 50 or above, I think you were able to start from 0 and you could prestige all the way up to like 13. I might be pulling that out of my butt. I don't know. But it was like you're kind of like elitist style mentality. Like the more prestige you had in Call of Duty, the better you were of a player, blah, blah, blah. We could talk about that forever. But I'd also be remiss, like going back to what you said, Gavin, about like how there was a hard line between Xbox players and PlayStation players. The thing that was like the tipping point for me was one, a lot of my friends had Xboxes and I wasn't able to play with those folks, which sucked at the time. But back in, I want to say April of 2011, there was a major PlayStation Network shutdown where it was off for 3 whole weeks. And I remember just being so pissed off. I'd get off like of high school or middle school or whatever, get off the bus, want to go play with friends, and it was off for 3 weeks. It felt a lot longer than that, to be completely transparent. I thought it was 3 months, but when I was doing research for the show, it was just 3 weeks. But that was a major thing back then, and actually kind of was my tipping point to get into Xbox 360 because I was like, I'm not going to deal with this PlayStation Network outage again because I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, it had that major stint of it being down. It was up for like a week and then it went down again for a couple days. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And that's when I actually switched over to Xbox 360. Oh, I guess that is a natural transition to Xbox 360 life. But Gavin, I'll give you some space to talk about Xbox 360 since you were more of an Xbox loyalist at the time.
yeah. Good transition point with it. Call of Duty was also one of my first forays into competitive gaming that wasn't just like Mario Party or like GoldenEye and stuff like that, where you're just sitting in front of a TV with some people at a party. So I played that on Xbox. I think the first one I played was Modern Warfare 2. So really aging myself there. That was the first one I had ever played online. With the Xbox 360, I mean, you had your Halo, which is their flagship series, still is to this day. That was also really fun to play online. It was kind of like, you're a big space marine guy and you're just go around shooting aliens. It was just a cool concept. The music was good, the graphics looked good, and it was just super fun. I mean, the reason I had an Xbox is partially because all my friends had Xboxes, but it's also like at that time the Xbox Live was online was a lot better than PlayStation. It was more consistent. You did have to pay for it, which I don't believe you had to pay for PlayStation at the time. You do
I don't
nowadays
think
because
you.
you
Yeah,
can't.
you do now, but I can't remember if you did back then either. That's a good point.
Yeah, and that's partially why it wasn't as good. I mean, you had to pay for it, so you had more server access and server space. But I don't know. I the Call of Duty games, they definitely fulfilled something that in deep in me that I didn't know I needed. Because like, there's nothing like hopping on with your boys in a party with those crappy little like headset mics on. You
Hmm.
put it on there, and then you just jump into a game and you start shooting people and talking mad crap. And I'm
Oh
saying like
yeah,
you're saying some unforgivable stuff to people as you're killing them, and that was just awesome. And it was fun, and it kind of started the competitive gaming side of myself, like where I got into that. Because then shortly later, I mean, at that whole time with Xbox in general, I had started playing like a lot more mainstream games. I wasn't playing as much. I was trying to fit in with my friends, you know?
right.
And being nerdy wasn't as cool back then, so I played like your Madden, FIFA, 2K, all of those games, and would play those online as well, which I've got a funny story we can talk about later about regarding that. Um, yeah, the Xbox 360 did a really good job of like I said earlier, it caught the middle demographic between the casual, the hyper cinematic, because the PlayStation did a really good job of having a lot of like continuing to make very good story games that looked pretty. And Xbox is like, we're just gonna make games that everyone wants to play, but still look good, but are still cool. Like like the Wii was great, but it's like we're gonna lean into this motion controller gimmick and we're gonna lean super far into that. And it's kind of like it kind of I mean, as much as everyone loved the Wii, it kind of was a detriment at times because the hardcore gamers didn't like the Wii because
Right.
the games were like kind of goofy games. But yeah, that's the Xbox 360 was definitely a console I put thousands upon thousands of hours on Xbox Live playing Call of Duty. I didn't play Gears of War as much, but it was main titles I played were like your Halos, any of the sports games like NCAA football, Madden, basketball, baseball, hockey. You name the sport, I probably played a game for it. Like I even remember playing like NFL Street, which is like a more cartoonish street version of the football game, and that was super fun. And I remember unintentionally messing with my brother, trying to teach him how to play that game because he was asking me. He asked me how to pitch the ball, and I said why, because that's the button it was. Parentheses, that's what it was. And he goes, because I want to know how to pitch it. And I said why? Like I was just
Press the
and
Y
then
button.
yeah, well, I didn't say that. I just kept saying
Yeah.
why. And then he finally just goes, Gavin, how do I pitch the ball? And I just said, press Y. Like he started crashing out on me. And I'm like, I'm telling you the whole time.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to run an option play and I need to pitch it. Like he started freaking out. And then once he
That's
realized what I was
hilarious.
saying, we kind of just laughed about it. But
Oh my god, that is funny.
yeah. Yeah. One of the most like that story still sticks in my head like perfectly to this day, and I still mess with my brother about it sometimes when he asks me how to do stuff.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say too, like Xbox Live was definitely a central part of gaming culture in my opinion as well, just to double down what you said. And I think the reason for that too was it wasn't just about the gaming experience, but I feel like that was the first time like I added a lot of friends that were in my close network, and you would also be able to see like one, you would get told when they're online so you could like go and join them whatever they're going to play, join a party. That was a big thing too with like the vocal chats. Like that was something that we take for granted now, but was a very revolutionary thing at the time, being able to jump on a party just to talk to your friends, even if they weren't playing the same game, which was really cool. And then also the character that you got to create too. Like you could customize your character and it will like every time you launched up Xbox 360, like your character would appear there. I remember a buddy of mine would have like a soccer ball that he was kicking on his foot. Like when you would like look at him, it would also be, I think, like grayed out if they weren't online versus in color if they were online. It was just like quirky little things like that that made it accessible, fun, social, and kind of changed gaming, honestly. Because to your point, Gavin, I don't know if you feel this
Yeah.
way too, but gaming was kind of like not nerdy, but kind of like you weren't. I feel like Xbox 360 made gaming more accessible to the layman, and it wasn't like the Wii. It kind of different from that, but it made it more fun and more like in vogue versus like the PlayStation 2, the Xboxes were more of like what I'd consider more like the hardcore gaming console people.
Yeah. The Xbox, I mean, Xbox Live Party Chat is like a precursor to like Discord. Cause you would sit in a like you said, you weren't even necessarily playing the same game sometimes. You'd hop on calls and you'd just be chatting with them and you'd be playing Call of Duty, they'd be playing Madden, what have you. It's literally like what a lot of people and I do sometimes myself is you sit in a Discord call with your homies and you're playing games and then sometimes you'll be like you'll get mad, you're like you'll freak out and they're like what happened and you like vent about what happened in the game. Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, I still have Xbox Live, you had to pick your username. I still have the same username that I used back in those days. Like it was like it became who you were and like you did meet people. I mean, it happens a lot more now because
Yeah.
and with the internet being more widespread, but that's just like you would meet people sometimes in a game and then like that's how like
The
I
friendship was molded. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it was funny because there's like there's friends that I have now that are like I would consider pretty much lifelong friends that I've made through gaming in general, and it's just funny. My mom used to give your parents used to give you crap, don't talk to strangers online and all that stuff, and it's funny because it's just like yeah, that's true, but like just use your judgment and figure it out. But like yeah, it's just funny that like I've made some. I mean, I took a trip last winter with a couple of friends that I had met online and like met through gaming, and it's just like they're lifelong friends that I have now, and it's through
Exactly.
gaming.
Yep. Yep. Which is pretty cool. Yeah. So, like, let's take a little step back from Xbox 360, more on the social component, but let's talk a little bit about the Wii and the DS specifically. So, you had Nintendo doing its thing when we were children with bunch of different properties, whether it was consoles or games. But I feel like the thing that Nintendo always does pretty well is they're not chasing flashy like Sony. They're not chasing, um, the social scene of like social networking of Xbox 360. They were just chasing what I would think of as like innovation. They were always bringing something fresh to the scene, which I've always appreciated about them. And the Wii came out and suddenly gaming wasn't just for the people like you and I that were a little bit more serious gamers, but they were accessible to just about everybody because of the motion controls. So you had things like Wii Sports, Just Dance, and everyone was loving it. Everyone is playing it. It was kind of like a, phenomenon. It was kind of like the Guitar Hero era, similar, but with like, making music accessible via gaming or like arcade style gaming to the mainstream. It was doing the same thing in a different lens. It's like parents, grandparents, friends who didn't game necessarily suddenly became gamers. Matter of fact, my husband's parents actually still have a Wii in their den and they're in their 70s. They have like the Wii balance board, they have like the nunchucks, they have the Wiimotes, like it was kind of just like a phenomenon. And I have a story about the Wii really quickly that I'll jump into as well. So like I told you guys about my PlayStation experience with the Blu-ray. I had a similar one with the Wii actually as well. So my parents, God love them, they're fantastic people. They were really influential in my gaming because they actually supported me in that. They didn't try to detract me from it. And so for my birthday, I want to say when I was, gosh, I don't even know, maybe sixth grade. I can't remember exactly. But regardless, we had been looking for Wiis forever. Like we had went to Meijer, Walmart. We would call them before to see, do you have Wiis in stock? Well, we have 4. You better hustle to get here. That was before you could like pre-order anything. It just wasn't a thing because of how scarce these Wiis were in the US. And I remember like I would always go along with my parents to go search for the Wii wherever they had called and found one. And so disappointment after disappointment. I want to say we've tried like 4 or 5 times at this point, and I'm just like over it. And I wake up like on a Saturday and it was getting close to my birthday, I believe. I come downstairs, and my parents are like, "We got a surprise for you." And I'm like, "What? Like, did you guys make me breakfast or what?" And like there was a Wii on the ground, and I was like, "No way!" Like it was such a crazy moment because like at that point, no one had a Wii. Like it was so scarce. And I just remember my parents going out, surprising me. They didn't tell me they even left the house. I was still sleeping, and I woke up and there was a Wii in like the den to play with, which just really freaking cool. So
That's awesome.
I digress, but that was just like a really cool thing. And like now recollecting a lot, I have to my parents to thank a lot for my gaming and my exposure because they've always been supportive every step of the way. But I know, Gavin, you want to talk a little bit about your own Wii experience. Tell me a little bit about the games that were influential for you for Wii.
Loved the Wii. Honestly, is one of my favorite consoles. Like I said last time, I still think that Nintendo GameCube is my favorite console of all time. Wii's up there, probably top 5. It kind of did like you had said, it wanted to make and it wanted to make everyone play it. Nintendo does this as a company. I truly think they don't like competitive games because one of their best competitive games that they've ever made was accidental. It's Super Smash Brothers Melee. They accidentally made what a lot of people consider a perfect fighting game, like the way like you can move fast, there's no decision lag, whatever. And then after that, they didn't like it. So they made every game like specifically like a worse version of that game because they didn't want it to be played competitively. So as a company, it seems like they don't like that. So they lean into the having fun because they want everybody to have fun, I think is why. But they lean into that. Like Wii was like one of the first ones that truly did that, like Wii Sports. I mean, I still think it's one of the most sold games of all time on the Wii because it came
Right.
with every Wii. And
Yep.
it's one of those games you don't even have to explain how to play it. You swing your arm to like you would swing a tennis racket to play tennis. You act like you're throwing a pitch to throw the baseball. Make sure you have the strap on the controller because otherwise you're gonna throw your Wiimote through the
Through
TV.
the TV.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and then you swing it like a bat. You act like you're bowling, swinging a golf club, all of that fun stuff. It was cool. Like it was kind of a cool change of pace, and it's like Nintendo did a really good job with it, and they were doing it for innovation purposes. But I think that's just a reach the broadest audience possible. Because like anyone can swing your arm to like anyone can do that. Like it's not a hard concept to pick up, but sometimes you give someone a controller and you ask them to jump into a Halo campaign and shoot a bunch of aliens. They're like they don't know what to do. Like it's complicated. So Nintendo, like for lack of a better phrase, they dumbed it down and made it easy to consume, and then they leaned into that, and the Wii itself was a great console because of that. And when you were talking about the Xbox Live avatars, the the Me avatars, I mean,
Hmm.
I spent countless hours trying to turn those into like you mess around with it and
Friends
you
and
try to
family.
make like we'll make friends and family, but you also make like Peter Griffin and
Hmm.
like Homer Simpson, and like you make funny cartoon characters like Shrek and stuff like that. You try to make them in the thing, and it was fun.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I do remember that. I think I had spent a copious amount of time doing like the building of my family so that when we would bowl, we would basically be able to see our character, our me, come up and do bowling, which
Hmm.
is hilarious. And there's another thought that I had on the Wii too. Oh yes, so I was gonna say I think the Wii was the first one that really did motion controls really well. If you remember, Gavin, Xbox tried with the Kinect to do something similar, but they wanted to try to beat Wii and not have any kind of controller. They just wanted your body to be the controller. And I thought while it was a good idea on paper, the sensor wasn't good. It was always like kind of buggy. You had to stand in a certain area for it to be able to pick you up. If you didn't, it wouldn't pick you up. But I think the Wii always did it better, and it's funny too. Like we'll talk about this like in collegiate years, but Xbox One actually launched with the Kinect with it, and versus the Kinect coming out after the fact with Xbox 360. But I always think we, to this day, probably in that era, has always done motion control better. Even with like the
Yeah.
peripherals, like if you wanted a shooting game, you could put the Wiimote in like a peripheral controller to make it better. Same thing, like I remember Mario Kart Wii specifically. They had
The wheel.
the steering wheel. Yeah, exactly. And it was just fun. Like they made everything fun, made everything accessible, made it not. Well, actually, I was gonna say not make it kind of restrictive to the mainstream, but they made it mainstream. So I would just double down on the fact that Wii was very influential in that time period too.
Yeah,
Um,
and they
yeah, go ahead.
also started body shaming in a joking way. Did you ever have the Wii Fit?
Oh yeah, uh-huh. With the
So
balance board and everything.
yeah, with the balance board, but you would type in your height and then you would stand on it, and if and it weighed you, and if it thought you weighed enough, it would plump up your me. Like it would make your me a little plump, and I'm like, whoa, you need to
Let's
chill
dial it
out. You
back.
need to chill out, Nintendo. But
Yeah.
I know that was actually one of the most accurate scales of anything. Like it was the most accurate scale we had in the house, and I was a wrestler in high school, so I actually used the Wii Fit as my scale at home for when I was trying to cut weight to know how
Yeah.
much I needed to lose, because it was actually a very accurate scale.
Yeah. I would say too, one of the things I think it's more common now, but we, in my recollection of gaming, was the first one to try to introduce gaming to work out. Like if you remember, they had like the boxing game that you could do, or the Wii Fit kind of thing.
Hmm.
But also, I would be remiss to not mention how crappy of a Tony Hawk game there was with the you know exactly what I'm talking about. Tony Hawk Ride. Oh my gosh, I wanted that game to be so cool. It was advertised as being so cool. It had Tony Hawk and like commercials playing on it, and it was basically like your way of bringing skating to your living room. And it
It
just
was like,
wasn't that. It was so bad.
I think they wanted it to be like Guitar Hero with
Yeah,
skateboarding, where
they
it's like
tried.
you're doing it with the controller. I think they rushed it to
Yeah, they
market
did for
because they
sure.
wanted it to come out, and I think Tony Hawk's even said this is like the concept was there, but it wasn't ready. Like the development hadn't quite gotten to where they wanted it, but they needed it to come out anyway, so they kind of rushed the game out.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
that
and
that was, like, kinda when everyone stopped playing Tony Hawk games is when that game came out because everyone's like, "Oh god,
oh
this is
yeah.
terrible."
Well, I feel bad for my parents too at the time because I think I had like advocated the crap out of getting that game because I was like, oh, it'd be awesome to play in the winter time. Like I don't have to go outside to play this. I could live out my like skating dreams or whatever. I don't think I included any of this to my pitch to my parents, but like it was an expensive game at the time, given you had to pay for the game plus the peripheral. I want to say you were probably like $100 in just for that game. I could be butchering that, but it felt
No, that
very
I mean, that
expensive at the
that
time.
sounds that sounds right, and the
Yeah.
problem with that is even if you get the peripheral, it's not like you're using that for any other game. Like, that's the only
Right.
game you're using it for, so you can't even, like, sell it on the peripheral side.
Yeah. It says, I just did a quick search while we're on here. The bundle, including the game and the unique skateboard peripheral, cost around $120, which is
Yeah,
ridiculous. Like, I feel
which
so
is, like,
bad.
$3,000 today. Not
Exactly.
really, I don't know, but it was very expensive, that's
Very
crazy.
expensive for the time.
$120, that's wild.
$120. And I feel bad because I think when I played it, I had only played it for like an hour and I was like, I can't do this. Like, it just wasn't accessible. It wasn't what it was sold to be. Regardless, I digress. Anything else you want to talk about the Wii before we talk about the DS?
Wii specifically? No, I mean, it had the Wii, we kinda hit on all the big points of it. It did the motion controls well. A lot of the titles were your classic Nintendo titles like Mario, Zelda, Metroid had a game for it, had hit on your major titles there. One of the games I played on it the most was MLB Power Pros. It was like a little
Mm-hmm.
anime, like there's a little baseball game, but the people were like almost like Rayman because they had no arm,
Oh
like
yeah. Uh-huh.
the arms weren't attached to the body, and they just had feet. But it was like a little cartoon game, and I probably put thousands of hours into that in that baseball game, and it was super fun. But yeah, that one even didn't even use the motion controls to play baseball. You just use the nunchuck and the Wiimote to like use as a controller. Yeah, I played the crap out of that game.
Yeah. I was going to say, just along those lines, too, I believe Mario also had its own baseball like game. I can't remember what it was called. I'm trying to look it up on the side. but I
Mario
played the
Super
crap.
Sluggers.
Super Sluggers. Okay, I was thinking Superstars. Okay, Super Sluggers. That was fun too. And I want to say there was also, and I'm gonna look this up too. But do you remember when there was I think it was Sonic and somebody else.
Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games.
That's it.
I played the crap out of that game.
That was fire. So
that was like it was a sports game, but it was still Mario. And yeah, to run, you would take the Wii remote and you would
shake the crap out of it. Yeah.
You would, to do a 100-meter sprint, you would just shake your arm as fast as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I played the crap out of that because it was I think it was for the London games. I don't know.
I think it was.
And then they made one for like the Tokyo games, and yeah, those were fun games because
they were.
Did the Olympics as like Luigi or Mario or Waluigi or Bowser,
or Sonic or Knuckles or
the Sonic, Sonic, Knuckles, Big E the Cat or Amy.
Yeah, for sure.
Shadow the Hedgehog.
Exactly. Yeah, it was really cool. Let's talk a little bit about the Nintendo DS. So I'll have you flash yours up on the screen here too, Gavin, for everybody. I've got mine, OG one. Don't judge me. I haven't cleaned it. Gavin's is cooler. His is the 3DS. But let's talk a little bit about Nintendo DS and just kind of like what it did for the time period too. So I mentioned this already, but Nintendo had gone through a spurt with handhelds where we had the original Game Boy, the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy SP, and then we started to transition more into like the Nintendo DS series. And they had a long longevity with it. And basically the premise behind it was including two screens. One of those screens was going to be a touchscreen. And I think that was very revolutionary at the time for handheld gaming, exactly like Gavin's got on his screen. And it introduced a stylus that you could use on the touchpad. And there was always some kind of component where the touchscreen would tie back to the main screen in some way, shape, or fashion. The main one, I'm sure you played this too, Gavin, was Nintendogs for me. And RIP to all the Nintendogs out there that are stinky, haven't gotten fed, haven't gone to any competitions. Sorry, guys, life happened. But I'm pretty sure every single digital dog died during that time period, so I'm sorry. But it was a really revolutionary game at the time because you got to own so many different puppies. I think that was the first time that I got exposed to a Shiba Inu. I never knew what that was before that time. Just a really cool game. But the Gavin and I before the show brought our Nintendo DSs out, and I still have the DS where you had still the Game Boy Advance side, so you could plug it in. But then there was also the side where you could put the Nintendo DS cartridge in. And I was looking, just for the listeners here, my Nintendo DS had Spider-Man Edge of Time. Don't remember playing that, as I mentioned before the call. And then we also have Pokemon Leaf Green, which, in my opinion, was one of my favorite of all time Pokemons, especially because that's the one that we grew up with, was that series or that generation of Pokemon. But Gavin, what did you have in your Nintendo when you looked back at it?
Mine is it's the 25th anniversary, 20th anniversary 3DS, and I still have in it Pokemon Ultra Sun, which is the second game, because they did Sun and Moon, and then a couple years later they did Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which is like a couple years later the story. But it's the one that was themed after Hawaii. The whole region of that game was themed after Hawaii. So you have a lot of Hawaiian themed Pokemon. Like there's one Pokemon that's a lei. It's called Comfey, and it's just a little floral lei that that's the Pokemon. But that's the game in mind. But I did play a little bit of Nintendogs, but the first game I can think of that wasn't like Pokemon or Mario that I played that like really utilized the DS was Cooking Mama. Don't know if you played Cooking Mama.
Mm-mm.
It was like you're just this like it's like this little anime mama and you cook, and so you would stir the pot, you would chop stuff and like cut it, and then you would blow into the microphone to like cool off something before you served it. And like it really utilized that second touch screen well, and it used the micro. It's one of the first first consoles that successfully used the microphone. I remember back on the 64, they had a game called Hey You Pikachu that had a microphone like it came with a microphone attachment, and you could yell specific commands to a Pikachu to like get it to do stuff. But this is the DS is one of the first consoles that like actually properly utilized how a microphone can work. Like, because like with the Nintendogs, you could yell commands at it and it would do stuff as well. So yeah, the DS. I think the difference, because we kind of brought up the PSP, the difference between the PSP and the DS is Nintendo treated it like it was a handheld console that did its own thing, whereas the PSP, I feel like they tried to make it truly a PlayStation, and they wanted it like to make the same kinds of games they're making on PlayStation on the PSP, and that just didn't work at the time. You could not have the same graphics. The games were always kind of worse, and like I think that's why PSP kind of failed as a console. Like it didn't completely fail. It still sold out quite a bit, but you don't hear about it anymore. They don't make it anymore because they got away from it because it just wasn't as successful as the DS.
Right. And I would say, too, just from my own exposure with PlayStation Portable or PSP, as you mentioned, definitely the graphics could not uphold the standard that PlayStation was setting as a precedent at the time. That's absolutely accurate. I'll also say, funny story. So the cartridges that PlayStation Portable came in, they were in like this white container with a disc inside of it. And you would just basically plug that in and you'd close it kind of like a cassette player, basically, I guess is the quickest, comparison I can make. My sister-in-law, her cousin also got a PSP and was like, yo, Dylan, the PSP is not working. Like, I don't know why. And then I was like, okay, well, let me take a look at it. I'm young, but I could probably figure it out, as what I kind of told her. And she gave it to me. The cousin had taken it out, the disc, out of the white container. Somehow it wasn't scratched, took it out of the container and had it sitting in the tray. And I was like, you can't do that. If you you have to keep it in the cartridge, that's what's holding it in place so that it can scan the disc. Oh, it was so embarrassing. I was like, I'm so glad I didn't do that, because if I was that cousin, like in retrospect, I would have been mortified. But just funny story with the
Yeah,
PSP.
that's terrible. I mean, the worst thing that happened with the Nintendo DS things is kids would eat them, which is
Mm-hmm.
why on starting with the Switch they put a bitterant on the cartridge. So if you are to take a Switch cartridge right now and try to lick it, it'll taste terrible. So literally, so kids will not eat it.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. But on that same note, I think going back to PSP, they didn't have much. I think they had some initial success with it. Wasn't as successful as they wanted. They did try the PS Vita later, which I do have a model of now. Didn't have one at the time, but I think it was pretty innovative from a different regard. Like, I think you're right, Gavin. Like, Nintendo DS was revolutionary from a bringing Nintendo properties on the go, making them more accessible, making it a little bit more engaging as well, not just pressing buttons, but having different levels of engagement. But PS Vita actually did a good job of up leveling the PSP experience. But because PSP did miss the mark at the time, the PS Vita didn't get its time in the sun as much as it should have. But now, knowing how popular Switch is, how popular Switch 2 is, my recollection, or my, reading the tea leaves, I think PlayStation will come out with something soon. I mean, they do have the PlayStation Portal, which is basically a glorified PlayStation remote play device. That's why I haven't got my hands on one myself. But if you look at Xbox specifically, just on the handheld front, you also do have the Xbox ROG Lix now that people are, well, it's a co-branding exercise with Asus. I even have an Asus ROG Ally myself. But I think going back to Nintendo and being innovative and being, very like first onto the scene in terms of innovation, the Switch really turned everything on its head. But it did start with those foundations of Nintendo being in the Game Boy, in the DS, etc. But
Yeah.
anything else, Gavin, you wanted to say about DS before we kind of wrap up this episode? Just realize how long we've been going.
Yeah, it's been a minute. That's what happens when you start rambling.
Mm-hmm.
No, though one thing I'll say is like I think the PSP could have been successful if they would have leaned into
What it was good at.
almost porting. Well, what it was good at, but what they could have done instead of making like the new games for PlayStation on PSP, take the old games that we talked about on your PlayStation 2, put
Mm-hmm.
those on the PSP until because think about it, like if I don't necessarily need to get Uncharted 4 for PSP, I have it on PS3, but I don't have a PlayStation anymore, so give me Crash Bandicoot. Like I just think if they would have leaned into that instead of trying to make the current titles also portable, they would have been a lot more successful.
Well, it's kind of like going back to the Kingdom Hearts thing that we talked about a little bit ago. Like with Nintendo DS, they had the 1.5s that were different than 1 and 2. They had the
Yeah.
2.5s that was different than 2 and 3. Like they were not trying to make Kingdom Hearts games for Nintendo DS that were the same as the ones on the console because they knew that they wouldn't win out. So I think that's a prime example for sure.
Yeah, they leaned into it being it's a separate console, not an extension of their current console.
Right.
And
They use the
that's
opportunity to
why
take the
it was
story to the next
successful.
level. Not,
And
yeah,
that's
not
why,
the
yeah, that's
experience.
why, yeah, why it was so successful. And it's still, I mean, they didn't shut down the 3DS online store until about 2 years ago. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. They shut it down finally. I remember there's a lot of people that are actually mad that they were shutting it down.
Yeah. I mean,
It's like, well,
eventually you
you
got to
have a
shut it
Switch
down.
now. Well, you have a Switch now. Like, it's just a big DS,
Right.
you know?
Right, which we'll talk about the Switch in a future episode, I'm sure, and how long of a life cycle that had. I mean, it's been out for God knows how long, and Switch 2 just coming out last May or ish time frame. Just a really longevity. I think Nintendo does a really good job in that regard, is making products that last and products that are going to be innovative, accessible, new, but become like mainstream mostly. Like they made gaming fun, is what I can say quickly. So. Cool. Well, let's wrap up there. Just doing a quick highlight, though, of this era for us. I think what this era really did that made it special, just to recap, was multiplayer gaming really took off in this era. Online play became like a normal thing. Headsets, friendless, trash talk, as Gavin mentioned, after school sessions that turned into all-nighters. And gaming became social in a way that it just hadn't been before, like we mentioned in passing here. So, and this was also when developers were just experimenting more. Motion controls, things like Xbox Connect that we talked about, trying to figure out new ways to get people moving and interacting with video games. Again, not all of it worked, but it definitely changed how we thought about video games and what those could be and what those could look like. But like I said, I think this is a good place to end our episode here. If you're enjoying what we're doing, please subscribe, share with your friends, drop a comment below. We'd love your feedback so we can shape future episodes. Again, Gavin and I are just doing this for fun. We love talking about video games, and it obviously has been very influential in our lives, so we hope that you guys enjoy that. But stay tuned for a future podcast episode dropping soon, where we'll dive a little bit deeper into the next era of our lives, which is going to be the early collegiate years and the games that we are playing now in adulthood that we want to chat about. So thanks again for listening. We'll catch you all in the next one.
Thanks, guys.